Yo guys, Punkrat on another video. So a couple months ago, I released a video that was relatively popular with you guys titled the top 5 most OP combos in classic WoW. And for the most part, they were combos that could basically global enemies. And that's really the word that I want to focus on for this specific video, globaled. This has been a phenomenon in World of Warcraft's history for a really long time. It's not just synonymous to classic WoW. I know that in the current state of the game, Blizzard's kind of tried to move away from these kinds of combos, but for some reason, the player base always ends up finding a way to global their enemies. And in my opinion, some of the most memorable times that I have in World of Warcraft, especially related to PvP, are during the patches where this sort of gimmicky stuff was actually a thing. It makes the game so much more fast-paced and exciting. Now, if you guys aren't aware of what globaled means, it means to kill your enemy within a global cooldown, so essentially before they can react. It's kind of like a one-shot. So for this video, I want to go over the history of globaling your enemies and some of the most powerful combos in the history of World of Warcraft throughout the expansions. Now, these are really the ones that stick out in my mind when reminiscing and thinking for this video, so there's a good chance that I might have left one out. If you guys have a great idea, then go ahead and shoot in the comments, because a lot of the times you guys are aware of some things that may have slipped my mind. So with that said, here's the history of one-shotting in World of Warcraft. Let's get into it. So of course, all of this started in vanilla. Vanilla is the origin of World of Warcraft, but on this specific topic, vanilla is truly the nucleus. One-shot combos or globaling your enemies is quite synonymous with the vanilla WoW experience, and considering that most of you guys have been playing, I'm sure you've experienced that firsthand. There's so many classes out there that could pretty much just global their enemies. Of course, it depends on the matchup, it depends on armor, health pools, but it's honestly not that surprising in the context of vanilla PvP. Hunters can scatter trap a mage, unleash a full aim shot multi-shot combo, and literally one-shot that target if the stars align and they get all the crits necessary. We've covered this obviously in the past as well. Warlocks in PvP later on, especially once they get more crit rating and spell power, can go destruction ruin spec based on soulfire, where they can seduce their enemy, cast a huge soulfire with a trinket, and literally one-shot. Mages can arcane power, pyroblast, and then palm a second pyroblast for probably the strongest one-shot potential in the entire game. Rep Paladins have Reckoning, where they can stack auto attacks after being crit and easily one-shot their enemy. Enhancement Shamans have Wind Fury procs with a shock on the backside. Elemental Shamans can do massive Elemental Mastery combos for similar damage output. Sword Spec Warriors with Wind Fury can one-shot pretty much anything. Rogues, of course, with Cold Blood can do the same thing. But really where it all originated from, and I'd say the earliest element of one-shot combos, are definitely rogues in the extremely early days of World of Warcraft, talking maybe from beta all the way to the first months of release. So way before people knew what they were doing, especially in terms of itemization, rogues were absolutely busted, and it was all based around one spell, Ambush. This has been almost like vanilla folklore since the dawn of its existence, rogues one-shotting you from behind. Back then, most people roaming around were in terrible green or blue gear, and rogues with a decent weapon were just running around ambush one-shotting people back to back, especially little mages and warlocks. It's a far cry from the experience today, where people are much more talented at playing their class, and also the baseline damage output from rogues has been reduced since the early days of concepting for World of Warcraft, but I'd say that's probably the earliest memory. That's where it started. Now, the next iteration of World of Warcraft is obviously the Burning Crusade, but to be completely honest, the idea of globaling your enemy is not super synonymous with TBC. I'd say TBC PvP is more, especially in the context of Arena, a war of attrition, and this is where resilience had hit the game for the first time. The gameplay is relatively fast-paced in the Burning Crusade, but it's not like people are just getting gimmicked over and over again with massive numbers taking out their entire health pool. But there is one thing that I want to glance over really quick. It's actually the spawn of multi-boxing shamans. So we'll go over this really fast because maybe it's cheating, but it's just something that sticks out in my mind so heavily. The Burning Crusade is where the 5v5 multi-boxing shaman arena meta was born. You'd have one multi-boxer with 5 shamans who would all heal each other, drop massive groups of totems, and all unleash with a chain lightning combo at the exact same time on the same target. This was the literal definition of a one-shot. One person who gets hit by this at the wrong time will instantly be evaporated. And to be completely honest, it's the only thing that I can really think of when it comes to really one-shotting somebody from back then. Of course, you have like palm pyroing and stuff, but with resilience, it wasn't nearly as effective as it was in vanilla. But here is really where things start to change in that regard, with the introduction of Wrath of the Lich King. The power spike from the Burning Crusade to Wrath was absolutely immense. You had stats like haste becoming widely available, and honestly to a pretty ridiculous degree, which I think was one of the best parts about playing WoW arenas back then. It was so fast paced in that regard. Stats like armor penetration, which made warriors and other classes absolute trucks to deal with. But when I think about Wrath of the Lich King, my mind only goes to one spot in relation to globaling your enemy. A lot of you guys might know exactly where I'm going with this. We're talking about elemental shamans and destruction warlocks, especially when you pair the two together on a spell cleave team. So in Wrath of the Lich King, we had two new spells that I'd say were pretty similar in relation to each other. We had Lava Burst and we had Chaos Bolt. Both massive bolts launched on an extremely fast cast time, and this is where haste comes into effect, because haste was so ridiculous back then, especially while being able to use heroism or bloodlust within the actual context of an arena. You would be able to instantly gib somebody in less than a second easily. So shamans would generally put flame shock on their target, pop heroism, cast a lava burst, and then follow it up with an earth shock, while warlocks would do something very similar, where they would probably open up with an immolate, a shadow fury to stun the target, allowing the shaman and the warlock to both cast on it at the same time, chaos bolt on the shadow fury, and then conflagrate on the immolate dot. So the shaman would be casting a lava burst into a shock, where the warlock would be casting a chaos bolt into a conflagrate. During the later patches of Wrath of the Lich King, all of the damage combined is well over 30,000 damage instantly, and the average health pool back then during that phase specifically was from 30 to 40k. That's a clean one shot, and this is through resilience as well. This is actually a combo that I had a really good time running with my friend, and to be completely honest, it's one of my most memorable moments in World of Warcraft arenas over the years. And if we ever find ourselves playing Legacy Wrath of the Lich King, you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about. Now this next one shot is pretty damn notorious. It's actually from MOP, which I'd say is probably one of the more underrated expansions, especially in the context of PvP. Now it had a lot wrong with it, but I have some great memories from playing back then, and in terms of one shots, this is probably one of the most significant ones in WoW's history. We're talking about the 5-stack Taste for Blood combo. So this was an ability that honestly didn't really last that long. I think it lasted maybe one patch, and to be honest, the fact that it made it that long seems maybe a little bit crazy. So Taste for Blood back then was a mechanic that once you used Mortal Strike, it would enable the use of Overpower. And it says, in addition, Overpower hits have a 30% chance to enable the use of an additional Overpower and increase the damage of your next heroic strike or cleave within 15 seconds by 100%. Now that seems pretty good, right? Well, it gets even better than that. This effect could stack up to 5 times. So you would be able to stack up that 100% damage bonus on your heroic strike times 500% increased heroic strike damage. That's a number that might baffle the mind, but that was really what it did. Now heroic strike, even with the 500% damage modifier, wasn't enough to one-shot somebody. But if you were to combo this with Avatar, which increases your damage significantly by a base percentage, on top of that you would drop the Skull Banner. And what this was a war banner that you would drop in an area, and it would increase the critical strike bonus of you and your party members by 20%. On top of that, you would pop Recklessness, which would guarantee the crit, allowing you to benefit from that 20% crit damage bonus increase. And then of course you would pop your Trinket, your offensive trinket, increasing your attack power or strength. All of this lined up together, if timed perfectly right, while the enemy had no defensive cooldown up, would result in a literal one-shot. 100% HP down to 0 pretty much instantaneously. There were two really famous clips from back in those days that would highlight exactly what I'm trying to explain to you guys here. The first was from Vive playing against Jamili in a 3v3 arena game. They lose their healer Zilia, but Vive manages to sneak out at the last second of his Taste for Blood 5-stack combo, popping all of his cooldowns and striking Starship with a heroic strike for for 290,000 damage. And the other popular video is for Wreckful pretty much doing the exact same thing and hitting for 300k, as you can see here. Alright, now sticking in MOP, there was actually a couple more that we should definitely talk about. This next one is a massive burst combo that would seemingly just pop out of nowhere, and it was generally used on enhancement shamans. I played so many arena games back then, and I just remember sometimes losing to enhancement shamans, not really knowing what the hell just hit me. This was the era of instant elemental blasts. So in the modern version of the game, enhancement shamans have this ability called Maelstrom, and essentially it's a proc that gives them the ability to instant cast a spell. What was really unique during patch 5.4 of World of Warcraft was the last tier for enhancement shamans. They had access to Elemental Blast, which was basically an elemental shaman spell. It was kind of like them having access to Lava Burst. What was so crazy about it is that they could pop all of their offensive cooldowns, go all in, and then get a Maelstrom proc and shoot off an instant elemental blast, which would sometimes hit so damn hard. Here's a visual from Bajira's stream from back then, where he gets a 225,000 crit on his elemental blast. And this stuff was honestly pretty regular. It happened all the time, I promise you. Probably just my opinion, but I think this was probably one of the best times to be an enhancement shaman. It was a really fun spec to play. In the current state of the game, enhancement shamans just kind of proc a ton of little hits over and over again. Back then, they were more hybrid in the sense that they had consistent DPS going out when they popped their cooldowns, but they also had the opportunity to launch an absolute nuke on their enemies. Now, for this next one, it didn't actually make the game, but it was an immensely viral video during the Legion beta. I think about 3 years ago. And of course, it's a one-shot macro from the guy who pretty much dedicates most of his World of Warcraft time to creating singular macros that do this type of thing, Swifty. So during the Legion beta, he actually figured out that you were able to cast all of these spells back to back on the same global. And there was a talent called Focused Rage, which allowed you to stack up to 3 times, increasing the damage of your next shield slam by 50% each, so 150% damage in total. Very similar to what we saw with Taste for Blood in MOP. Now, what's super crazy about this is just the sheer number that comes out of it, especially considering that you're a prot warrior. When stacking up all of these abilities, plus Avatar and everything else on top of each other, you were able to get out numbers like this. Regular over 1 million crits. This is super insane, and to be honest, I wasn't even playing the game at this time. I actually sat out for Legion. It's the only expansion that I didn't play in the history of World of Warcraft, but even though I never played it, I definitely saw this video and I had to put it on the list, because this is just what Swifty does, and you can't make a one-shot video without mentioning him. And now the last one, and probably the most current that I want to cover, is from BFA. So for BFA, we're talking about the mage with a new spell called Greater Pyroblast. So during the early launch of BFA, mages realized that Greater Pyroblast was actually quite powerful. It's a hard casted nuke that takes 4.5 seconds to let off. But what's interesting about it is that the damage that it deals is based off of the target's total health, 35% to be exact. And right off the bat, you had a bunch of very familiar faces in Zico, Venruki, and some other mages that figured out they could start off the arena invisible, all line up their meteors on the ground, and hard cast a Greater Pyroblast. And once everything hits at once, they could pretty much just 100 to 0 and global somebody out of nowhere. This is again a viral video from a more recent time. It's quite cheesy, but again, it had to be on the list. There's the video covering, I'd say, the most notorious one-shot or global combos from the history of World of Warcraft and its many expansions. Now, I tried to stick to things that I actually experienced that happened to me or that I remember specifically from playing the game back then. So of course, I probably missed a couple of them. If you guys know of a really interesting one and you can link me a viral video in the comments section, then please feel free to do so. I love this kind of thing, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video and enjoyed seeing those massive numbers on the screen throughout the different combos that we covered. Now, of course, if you like this video and want to see more like it, make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill, soldiers. Make sure to hit the notification bell to be notified every single time I post a new video straight out of the render oven. And with that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.